It looks like we have pretty good attendance so far, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Pennsylvania Nutrition Education Network webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about strategies for impactful success stories and telling the SNAP-Ed story. So my name is Camille. I'm the director of PANEN. And PANEN provides education and training opportunities to SNAP-Ed partners and nutrition and public health professionals across Pennsylvania. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through some of our normal housekeeping things. So we will be recording this webinar. The recording and the slides will be available on the PANEN Online Learning Management System after the webinar today. If you would like to see these or rewatch the recording, we are happy to help you get onto that LMS. After the webinar, there will be a brief survey, so we always appreciate any feedback that you're able to provide. If anybody needs captions, they will be available on the Zoom if you click the live transcript tab. And if anybody has problems finding that, feel free to message one of us in the chat. This presentation will be about 50 minutes and we'll save 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. And during the presentation, any of the Q&A that you have or any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom, and then we'll reserve the chat for more comments and just more interactive things throughout the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please message one of the PANEN team members in the chat as well. So today's webinar is strategies for impactful stories and telling the SNAP-Ed stories. So we are joined today by Ryan Roslin and Marcy Coffey to help present this webinar, along with me and Allison Love. For today's agenda, we're going to go through just introducing some success stories and giving some SNAP-Ed context of why we're here today. Marcy is going to talk a little bit about graphic design and some how that plays into the success stories that have been presented so far. We're going to go through some different best practices and then also provide some resources and examples towards the end. And then, like I said, have a little bit of time for Q&A. So just in case you are new to SNAP-Ed, I do just want to give a quick introduction. So SNAP-Ed is an evidence-based program focused on nutrition and physical activity. SNAP-Ed initiatives include nutrition education classes, social marketing campaigns, and efforts to improve policy systems and the environments of the communities. As part of the context today, the House resolution that was passed earlier this summer called the One Big Beautiful Bill did eliminate funding for SNAP-Ed. However, for SNAP-Ed partners in Pennsylvania, we're extremely lucky to have an additional year of funding. So SNAP-Ed partners in Pennsylvania and around the country came together in a really unprecedented way over the past few months to share impacts and successes of SNAP-Ed. And its importance to recognize the heart and the hard work and collaboration of SNAP-Ed leaders, educators, advocates. So as mentioned, because PA has carryover funds, we are very lucky to have the opportunity to continue the programming for another year and then communicate that success as well. So as part of that today, I do want to kind of give a little bit more context again to kind of all of these different terminologies that we use for success stories. So I think we really use that term success stories in the context of SNAP-Ed, but it's not just success stories, it's reports, testimonials, narratives. So to start out, I want to hear from you. What are the different terms that you guys use for success stories? So feel free to pop into the chat what you call your success stories. What are examples or ways that you share it? Impact reports. Yes, definitely. And there's more like official annual reports that people do every year. We do success stories on social media, even just highlighting newsletters. Definitely success stories in our pairs documentations. Positive feedback. Yes. Positive feedback on behavior changes. Lovely. Great. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a lot more to success stories than just the term success stories. But I know within the context of terminology, we really do focus on that. So I do just want to point out that today's focus is to really talk about how we can use these success stories to educate and advocate for SNAP-Ed, and also talk about ways to have engaging and visual communication through different modalities. And we're not really going to dive too much into like the pairs versions of success stories. Um, this is because the pairs requirements are a little bit different than what might be better for certain audiences. But at the end of this webinar, we will make sure that we still have a little bit of information. So why should we create success stories? What is the importance of them? Stories that we share can help improve the visibility and generate support for our programs. So I want to kind of go through here to get your mind in the right spot as we go through some of these best practices. So when we're thinking about success stories, we want to think about, what are we really sharing? Is it quantitative data? Is it numbers? Is it qualitative, where we have more of a narrative format? Are we sending before and after pictures? Sometimes a story can even be led through a demonstration, through quotes. We also want to think about how it's being shared. So whether it be in a digital format, which has been really our main course over the last several months. Is it more physical? Is there paper that you're able to drop off at places? Are you doing things more visually with pictures? Are you doing auditory podcasts, interviews, videos? And then we also just want to think about, who are these stories coming from? Who are the storytellers? And also who it's for. So part of this can be community members, funders, legislators, your partners, your staff. All of those questions kind of have a combination of answers, but you'll really want to think about who stories are being told and who are they for. And so as we go through some of these best practices and things that Marcy and Ryan and Allie are going to share today, just keep some of that stuff in mind. So for our next section here, I'm going to pass it over to Marcy Coffey. She's going to discuss graphic design for success stories. She is the co-founder of WFGD Studio, which offers design solutions for clients in a cross-section of industries, including public health and nutrition settings. WFGD has worked with SNAP-Ed management entity at Penn State on multiple infographics and communication projects to share out PA SNAP-Ed success stories. So pass it over to you, Marcy.
Great, thanks so much, Camille. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me and we're good to go. Thank you for that intro. It was a good intro. We've worked with Ryan and PA SNAP-Ed for a couple of years now. And they've mostly used us as a resource to create some fact sheets and infographics and to really highlight their program with success stories. So that's sort of what we'll talk about today. We're mostly going to concentrate on fact sheets, like little 2-pagers that can get your message across, get your story across with infographics and fast facts. So I really just want to start off with why design matters. So good design makes your impact clear, memorable, and professional. And good design makes success stories engaging, credible, and you look professional. So there are ways to do this, you can hire a designer or you can use in-house tools such as Canva. Canva is a very large platform and it's gotten better over the years. So if you would like to tackle some of these things on your own in-house for more economical reasons, Canva is a great resource. So first we'll talk about some essential elements of a fact sheet. And then we'll sort of go back to the fact sheet that we've recently designed for SnapEd and highlight those. So first, it's important to have a clear, compelling narrative, something with a problem, a solution, and an outcome. You'll want to have a clear headline, impact statement, 1 or 2 sentences that summarize the value of the story. Supporting visuals are charts, icons, photos, illustrations that help to humanize the story. Quotes and testimonials are always great as well. Also, being consistent with your branding, colors, fonts can all add a professional look to all of your documents. And lastly, it's important to have a call to action, something at the end. A QR code, a website to go to for more information are all essential elements that are great on a fact sheet. You don't need all of these elements. It's difficult to incorporate everything without making it look too busy, but white space and short, quick bullet points are great. Especially nowadays, people are used to social media and getting the information really quickly. So a fact sheet can help support that. If you want, okay. So basic design principles when you're thinking about how to organize a fact sheet. Keep it simple, use white space and avoid clutter. Make sure your language is really accessible and not too confusing and just very clear so that everyone can read it and it's a quick read. Typography, usually stick to 2 fonts, 1 or 2, 1 for headings and 1 for body copy to make everything stand out. Colors, use your program's official colors or like a limited palette. Hierarchy is important. Make the most important info large and stand out, such as like numbers and quotes and any other infographics. And obviously, like mix the text with the visuals so that it doesn't look too overwhelming. Yeah, so this is just a kind of faded out version of a recent graphic that we made for SnapEd. And this was a 2-page like letter size fact sheet that you could share through like PDF and email. You can post it on social media. You can reformat it so that it's it's like one full graphic. So again, we have a clear headline at the top and the program information. We have an impact statement paired with some illustrations. We use facts, fast facts, and large numbers to communicate, social media reach and other things like social media marketing. The other aspect I have highlighted is little icons. It helps to break up the text. Any way to break up large amounts of text is a good idea so that people can kind of flow through the text and also have some visuals to pair with it and it doesn't look so text heavy. We also paired some illustrations with this, or you can use photographs to help make the stories relatable. Again, we're showing a QR code so that you have somewhere to land after you read the fact sheet. And again, we're highlighting some success stories, the Be Healthy PA app and other partnerships. I just wanted to show a quick other fact sheet. This has nothing to do with SnapEd. This is for the city of Philadelphia. But again, you can see how a lot of the points that I talked about with the headline and success stories and fast facts and pull quotes all relate to this fact sheet as well. We have charting and infographics, big numbers, and then at the end, call to action, QR codes, phone numbers, anywhere else you can get additional information. Okay, so key takeaways. Good design makes success stories engaging and credible. You don't need to be a designer. Obviously, we are, and we've helped PA SnapEd a lot. It does help to hire a designer if you're short on time, if you need something done quickly, don't have time to do it in-house. Canva is also a great tool if you want it for everyday needs and social media. It does take some time to learn the program, but it does have a lot of capabilities if you want to do it in-house. But as long as enforce the design elements that we're talking about, you can have nice professional fact sheets for your success stories. So thanks all for joining me today. And if you have any questions, I'm not going to be on for the full call, but if you want to put them in the chat and I can answer them later, that would be great too.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcy. So next, I'm honored to welcome Ryan Rosendale. Ryan is the program evaluator at the PA SNAP-Ed management entity at Penn State. Ryan is a registered dietitian with a PhD from Penn State. He brings forth a wealth of knowledge to the world of SNAP-Ed, including clinical research, social research, and sports nutrition. I'll pass it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Camille. Good morning, everyone. As Camille mentioned, I am the project evaluator at the management entity office of PA SNAP-Ed. I've been in that role for almost 10 years now, this November. So I feel like I've learned a lot in those 10 years, but I still tell people it's my first day when I make a mistake somewhere. So thanks everyone for attending this morning. I know Camille mentioned a bit more about why we might write success stories. But I'm here this morning with a few slides from sort of the perspective I'm coming at this issue of success stories and impact reports with, because my thinking as a project evaluator has really changed over the past maybe 2 or 3 years. If you would ask me 5 or 6 years ago how many of our partners wrote success stories about SNAP-Ed programming, I would tell you not many, if any. Routinely wrote success stories. But as Camille mentioned, the funding for PA SNAP-Ed and SNAP-Ed nationwide has really come into a bit of a sticky situation here in the last 3 to 6 months. So as we are indeed funded for another year of SNAP-Ed in FY26, we want to continue to educate and advocate for why our program is important and impactful in helping low-income Pennsylvanians make healthful dietary decisions as they seek to make the healthy choice, the easy choice with their SNAP-Ed benefit or their SNAP benefits. So we mentioned a few ways we might communicate success stories, whether they're impact reports or paper media, digital media, podcast, video format. But my pitch to you in the next several minutes is sort of how I think in my mind to sort of work in a backwards process in crafting success stories. So if I get to the idea or the story that I want to pitch to a specific audience, I'll sort of use that as an anchor point and then work backwards to build my story from there. So the first issue I identify when writing success stories is, who is this success story or impact report going to be for? Is it for a funder or a politician, a legislator? Is it for an organization who you hope to partnership with in the future? So showing how your two programs can work together and how they complement each other in that way. Or is it for the general public? So, just to spread awareness of your program, to highlight your program and your staff and your participants to the public at large and say, this is the great work we're doing. Look at us. So again, from the legislature's perspective, so how does SNAP-Ed or your nutrition education benefit their interests or their constituents? So funders and legislators are always interested in how sort of programming can benefit their interests as well. And what is their return on investment? So is SNAP-Ed or your nutrition education programming being of direct benefit to this constituency? Are they saving funding by investing in SNAP-Ed or your nutrition education program? What's in it for them? So that's sort of the funder legislature angle. As I mentioned, if you're looking for potential partnerships, how does your program complement what they're already doing or fill a need in their program? And how is SNAP-Ed as a benefit to their audience? So success stories can kind of complement and highlight your program to potential partners moving forward and say, hey, look, we'd be great partners. Look at the work we're already doing. And then for the general public, just to spread awareness of the work you're doing out in the community, to lift up your staff and to highlight your participants as well. So a success story can really be tailored towards a single audience or may combine elements that could be applicable to more than one audience with the same document. So once we've identified the audience for our success story, an important next step is to tailor our message. So we've picked an audience. So let's say it's a legislature. What are the critical issues that most resonate with this audience? What are they interested in? And once we've identified that, we can begin a process of writing our success story more clearly. So I'll use an example that has been a focus of us here at PA Snap Ed during the recent funding challenges. As many of you know, Glenn Thompson is a U.S. congressman who represents the 15th District of Pennsylvania. And in this capacity, he also serves as the chair of the House Agricultural Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. So we've identified Glenn Thompson as an important stakeholder in SNAP-Ed funding moving forward because, as most of you all know that SNAP-Ed is funded through the USDA, which is also guided by the Farm Bill. So his role as the chair of the House Ag Committee is important in securing funding moving forward for SNAP-Ed. So Glenn Thompson, if you don't know, comes from an agricultural background here in central Pennsylvania. And he's also cares very much about representing Pennsylvania agriculture and farmers. So messages about how SNAP-Ed programming support farmers, how the program may support dairy farming specifically, because Pennsylvania is a very large dairy farming state, and how these interests intersect. So SNAP-Ed and agriculture intersect has been sort of highlighted as a strategy to continue to advocate and educate for SNAP-Ed in Pennsylvania and nationally. So issues that might be most important to him, obviously, are agriculture, so things like farm markets, farm to school projects, farm tours, and healthy harvest initiatives. So we've identified our audience. We've identified what he may be interested in as a legislature, and now we can work backwards from that to craft success stories that are specifically geared to sort of the legislative angle of success stories. So that's our sort of focus right now. That may not be yours. So if you're more interested in identifying potential partners or just saying, look at our great program to the public at large, that's also a valid strategy as well. So my last bit of urgency is to urge you all to be prepared. So before I hand the presentation back to Ali and Camille, my biggest bit of advice is the best time to create success stories is right now. So while you all are out there doing your programming, interacting with participants, out there in the field as it is, the best time to think about success stories is now. So gather those quotes from participants, take pictures of your programming. I can't say how many times I've told partners this would be great for a success story. You have any pictures of the program? They say, unfortunately, we didn't take any pictures. So take pictures of your programming, of your staff. Take pictures of the food tasting samples and the cooking classes, and other types of information you think might come in handy while you're out in the field, implementing your programming. And then after the event, I would say either the day of or the day after, while that day is still fresh in your mind, take the time to get those success stories on paper, even just a rough draft. So you had that one great participant quote that caught your ear. You can jot that down so you don't forget. You can always stylize and refine your success story using some of the tips that Marcy talked about a bit later when you have additional time to devote to the success story process. And then finally, perhaps the biggest thing is have it ready to go. So have the success story finished, polished, and in formats that you can distribute to people who are interested in your story. So community events, agricultural summits, which I just attended last week, health fairs, back to school nights. You never know when the next advocate for SNAP-Ed is going to show up in front of you at an event, at your table at a back to school night, or just walk through the door of your office unexpectedly. And the sooner you can put that document in the hands of someone who will be your ally to work towards continuing to provide nutrition education program in Pennsylvania, the better off you are. So have those documents ready, either digitally. You can say, hey, I'll shoot you an email with my success story, or just have them in actual paper ready to go. So when someone who's interested in your program walks across either through your office door or past your table, you can put that success story right in their hands right then and there. So that's all I have for this morning. I'm gonna hand it back to Ali and Camille, but I will stick around, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them over the course of the next 40 minutes or so.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing your insights into success stories and sticking around for the Q&A. I really appreciate it. So my name is Allie Love. I am program manager here at PANEN. And next, Camille and I will discuss resources and examples for success stories with a few prompts that will ask you to participate in the chat. So just to get you ready for that. To start out, we want to recognize, as Camille mentioned, that you are success story pros. As community nutrition educators and PSE champions, you are already skilled at communicating and describing impacts because you do it every day in direct ed and PSE work. Plus, like Camille mentioned, over the past months, SNAP-Ed partners have been advocating for SNAP-Ed by creating success stories and, historically create success stories, as Ryan mentioned. And so next, we'll just look at a couple examples from PA SNAP-Ed. These are just a few samples, examples, and there's so many more. We just wanted to shout these out. As you can see here, these success stories are from PA SNAP-Ed partners, and they have a variety of platforms and formats, such as social media, websites, and downloadable PDFs. And the stories highlight pictures, quotes, descriptions, and are really eye-catching and colorful, like Marcy talked about with graphic design. And next I'll show a couple, these are video examples. And so a couple kind of upsides of videos are that they use a variety of those different formats. So they have the audio and the visual together. And then these two examples show kind of a more, maybe with like a phone or like a do-it-yourself kind of model with a staff or community member. And then also, you can do a success story video that is maybe a bit more stylized, like the one on the top left. So lots of different ways to do success stories with these examples. Here, we're going to ask for your participation again. So want to hear from you, the pros, in the chat. So just to get kind of the creativity flowing and to think about some of the success stories in your day-to-day, we just want you to pop in the chat an example of a program, a nutrition champion who comes to mind in thinking about creating your next success story. And as you're kind of thinking and popping these in the chat, just a reminder that every success can be a story. For example, a moment that might seem day-to-day or small can be a really meaningful success story. Every day that you are creating a positive impact in another person's life is a success. And so just would love a couple ideas in the chat to kind of get creativity and thoughts going for creating your next success story. So a champion teacher at one of my elementary schools helped to set up a timed garden hose for the summer garden. Wow, it worked fabulously. That is so helpful. I know from experience that summertime watering is a huge lift. So that's a huge success. Thank you for sharing. Any other ideas that pop out to people, just like a program or a champion you've worked with in one of your programs recently? So someone has mentioned working on connecting high school group who led a hydration event at their school to educate. Amazing. Yeah, that's really, really helpful to have champions directly in the school, a champion farmer helping at a local community center. Thanks everyone for sharing in the chat. You can keep thinking it over, keep popping them in the chat as we go. Someone said testimonials for making recipes from a hydroponic garden. Wow. These definitely sound like big successes. So thanks everyone for sharing that in the chat. And we'll come back to this question and kind of talk about some next steps at the end with this question. Next couple slides, we're really going to dig into this resource from ASNA. So it's a toolkit that talks about success stories. We're going to look specifically at the asset framing part of it and a couple of their templates. Thanks, Colleen, for popping the link to that in the chat. Just for a little more context, ASNA is the Association of SNAP Nutrition Education Administrators. It's a national organization of leaders in SNAP Ed and part of their work is to create SNAP-Ed resources. And they've also been doing a ton of advocacy around SNAP-Ed. This toolkit we're going to dig into in the next couple slides is called Ethical Storytelling and Asset Framing, and it was created by ASNA's Evaluation Committee in 2023. All right. So just to review, this might be familiar with a lot of people here, but asset framing is a communication approach that centers individual and community assets rather than focusing on a problem to be solved. And asset framing does not ignore or deny that problems exist, but instead allows for a more nuanced presentation of a story. And then in the next 2 slides, we'll look at a figure from the toolkit that describes different types of assets. And so when writing stories to disseminate, it's helpful to consider many different types of assets that already exist in the communities you're working within. And so here's the first 3 types of assets that they describe in the toolkit. So an individual asset, for example, a member of the community, their skills, knowledge, interests, and passions. An association asset. These can be formal or voluntary groups or informal social networks and relationships. And then an organization asset. So institutions like your organization and organizations you collaborate with can be assets. These are 3 more types of assets in the toolkit: physical spaces like green spaces, land, buildings, transportation, markets, economic assets like business and commerce, and then culture and stories, a huge one. For example, history, heritage, celebrations, music, and art. And here are some key steps described in the toolkit. These are really, overlapping with a lot of what Marcy and Ryan highlighted. So just to echo some of those points. The first one is to go to the source, seek community input, photos, and quotes. Review your data to highlight assets instead of deficits. And similarly, talk about community strengths first. And then focus less on individual behaviors, instead focus on root causes and social determinants of health. Focus on collaborations with the community. Consider your language, for example, avoid stigmatizing words. And just to note, we're not going to go into it a ton right now, but there's a really helpful kind of guide in the toolkit that goes into a lot more detail about different considerations with language and asset framing. And then rethink your headings in success stories, which we will talk about in the next slide. Here's another graphic from the toolkit, and this talks about headings to consider when you're writing a success story, kind of like starting to get that outline on paper. So for this, you can see the kind of before and after, and the toolkit describes how it's helpful to start with a summary and then focus on the social and community context, community assets, and collaborative action before wrapping up on how you will sustain the success. And feel like that definitely this is helpful kind of as an outline, but of course, when you're making your own success stories, you can for sure make this your own. You don't have to follow this directly. And then more from the toolkit, this is a planning checklist. This talks about kind of a list to run through and potentially, run back through as you're making your success stories. So consider your collaborators, provide participants the opportunity to review and amend stories before disseminating them. Make sure you have confirmed consent or permission for any images you're using common language, which Marcy talked about. So review language for readability and reading level, and also considering with your audience, who the intended audience is for. Maximize digital accessibility to ensure content is accessible for individuals who use screen readers, for example, with the font size, color contrast, and the flow of the content. And then kind of like what Marcy talked about with a action statement, I really like that. And they didn't actually mention that in this toolkit, but one of those action statements could be providing your contact information. And then just to echo Ryan's point earlier, definitely they talk about this in the toolkit, how it's key to consider your audience. And we just wanted to kind of draw a parallel to considering your audience to what you might do in a nutrition education or PSC setting. So for example, if you're in a nutrition direct ed class, you might ask members of the class to share some of their favorite foods at the start of the class, and then throughout the class, highlight those foods so that the content resonates. And so similar, similar situation with considering your audience and making sure that the success story resonates. And then the last point we wanted to mention here too is that it might be a repetitive process to consider this checklist, or you might come back to one step here. It's not so linear, and you might have multiple touch points with the storyteller, the participant of the program, the partner, for example. In the next 2 slides, we're going to look at 2 examples of success stories and how they demonstrate the tips from this asset framing toolkit. And so putting it all together, we'll look at this example from the toolkit that's written by SnapEd in Maine. And you can see with the yellow circles some of the ways that they're using this asset framing lens. So for example, in the top left corner, the title highlights existing strengths. It's titled Building on Strengths. It incorporates direct quotes from members of the community, and it measures the program participants' satisfaction and inclusion in the bottom left corner. And then also has a lot of the really engaging colors and design elements that we talked about before that Marcy shared. Now we'll look at an example from another helpful success story resource. So moving on a bit from the toolkit for a moment. This is a testimonial from the website savesnaped.org. And just for context, savesnaped.org is a website hosted by Leah's Pantry, a SNAP-Ed organization in California, with resources to help advocate for funding and share testimonials for SNAP-Ed programs across the country. And just wanted to shout out Pennsylvania. Thanks to PA SNAP-Ed partners, Pennsylvania has over 25 testimonials on the savesnaped.org website to showcase the incredible work happening here in our state. And so just to look at this example and thinking about these kind of tips from the toolkit, this example includes a quote from a school principal who worked with SNAP-Ed staff members at their school. And the testimonial goes to the source because it's a quote and it includes the photo. It talks about strengths of the students, SNAP-Ed staff members, and the direct ed and PSC programming strengths. It focuses on community collaboration, and it uses clear and compelling language. So from here, I'll pass it back to Camille for some more kind of participation in the chat.
Thanks, Allie. Those are all really great resources, and definitely make sure you click on the link in the chat for that toolkit. We'll be sure to send it out in advance, but it is a really wonderful toolkit, so we appreciate Allie highlighting all those. So now this is kind of the homework part of our presentation. A lot of the things that we just talked about feel, maybe a little bit more abstract, or you're like, okay, I could do that in a month from now, or maybe in 6 months. But as we know, we don't have a ton of time to do all of the things that need to be done. So I want to think or get you guys thinking about some ideas that you can incorporate some of these best practices that we talked about in your day-to-day routine. So go ahead and pop in the chat maybe an idea that came to you while you were listening of, oh, I could add that in my normal Monday routine. Or if anybody has any really great ideas that they've already incorporated into their kind of workflow on a day-to-day or weekly basis, that's helped them stay organized when it comes to prepping these success stories. So go ahead and pop some ideas in the chat and kind of think about what you're going to do in the next week or the next few days to incorporate some of these ideas. Maybe it's a little bit more daunting. Yeah, thank you. So following up with site partners after programming and asking if their students or participants had any particular feedback. That's great. Yeah, collecting photos from programming. We had a really lovely best practices work group meeting a couple weeks ago where some people shared some ideas that they had. And one example a participant shared was that they'll just send a text message or a Teams chat or a Google chat or whatever form of communication you typically use with your team to a coworker of theirs to be like, oh, don't let me forget to tell you about, what this person said, or don't let me forget to tell you about XYZ, so that then they told a friend to remind them to be able to elaborate on that story a little bit more. Yeah, being mindful of taking like those mental notes. Yeah, asking for key for different information during weekly meetings. So if your team works together on a uh, has like a normal standing meeting on Mondays, go through what was the highlight of everybody's, direct education classes that week. We do have a list of some other ideas if you want to go ahead and pop those up there, Allie. One thing that we can talk about is incorporating how you're going to track more like numeric data. I know we do a lot in star tracks, or used to do a lot in star tracks and pairs, but think about how that data can be incorporated into success stories. Think about saving notes on your app. Another partner had mentioned to us that they have a Google form that they send to their community partners to be able to collect some stories. You could use a template. There is one in the ASNA resource guide, so having that template kind of ready to go makes it easier. And just note that every organization might have different ways that they already collect success stories. And so, from an individual level, you can do what makes sense for you to keep organized, but then also consider what you're doing with your entire coworkers and your team, and kind of follow the processes too that's needed for that. Great. So, the last thing I just want to touch base on here is kind of pulling together all of this information. And as Ryan mentioned, really wanting to be prepared to provide these success stories. So we want to talk a little bit about dissemination and where they would be sent out. So within these channels, we want to think about what's going to be the most accessible for our audience. So similar how we want to gauge or gear our success stories to people's interests, we also want to make sure that how we're physically providing it to them is helpful. So for example, a printed information or a printed one-pager, two-pager might be more helpful for community members that have limited access to internet. But a printed piece of paper also might be really helpful for professionals that their inbox is just crazy busy and they might get lost in there. So a lot of times paper is a lot better for like legislators or somebody who might receive a lot of emails. You also want to consider how much time you have to create and coordinate these. So as Marcy mentioned, hiring an outside person when you're in a little bit of a time crunch can allow for some better design. Over the last few months, we've done a lot of digital things since that can be a little bit of a quicker turnaround. But you just want to consider how much time you have to create these resources. And now that PA SnapEd has a little bit more time than what we originally thought, this would also be a time for us to be able to create events and live situations to be able to share the success stories. So this can be where you think about hosting community members, stakeholders, funders, legislators to actually come into your sites where you do your direct education. This can also be where you create stakeholder events specific for inviting people into those events and doing demonstrations. I'll also just make a plug. A great way to show your success and the things that you've learned within SnapEd can be at conferences. So whether that be the PINEN annual conference or national conferences, you can also host webinars. And really just word of mouth. I think the main point we really want to drive home here is that you really want to do a combination of these efforts and really think about, what's the quickest, what's the most accessible, and really just a combination of all the approaches are the best. So finally, let's consider some next steps here. So earlier, we asked you to think about nutrition champions or programs that come to your mind in your recent work. So think about how you're going to start creating and sharing your success stories.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for all of the answers in the chat. I've seen a couple more come in here. I'll just shout out, there's a team thinking about creating a QR code with the survey feedback from where their educators could capture positive feedback from partners and participants. So just wanted to shout that out. And yeah, thank you everyone for sharing in the chat. It's just, there's so much work going on in every organization to really highlight your successes and shout out these really incredible programs happening. So thanks for popping your ideas in the chat. Just to wrap up here before we get into the Q&A, we wanted to share the resources that we talked about today and a couple other notes. We'll pop these in the chat, and here they are too. So ASNA's storytelling toolkit, the ethical storytelling and asset framing toolkit, we will link in the chat. There's also a webinar that complements the toolkit that's by ASNA. There are examples of success stories and ways to advocate for SnapEd on the SaveSnapEd.org website. And then also big shout out on the Food Trust's Voices of SnapEd website. There's really incredible testimonials and resources. And then another really quick note about ASNA is that they'll continue their work in fiscal year 26, and they have a LinkedIn where they'll be sharing updates. So that's a place where you can kind of stay connected to them. And then really quick, we just wanted to shout out a resource that's in that ASNA toolkit that does go into information about pairs. They have a template specific to pairs in the appendix of the toolkit. And so it includes kind of reframing how content is structured and can serve as an example for ways to tailor sharing data in a variety of formats, including infographics. So that does have a little more information on pairs specifically. We didn't get a chance to dig into that today, so we wanted to shout out this resource in the appendix of the ASNA toolkit. So without further ado, we would love to hear from you with any questions you have about the information today. Also feel free to keep popping ideas in the chat about success stories or ways that you're going to incorporate gathering success stories into your day-to-day. And also just really, really big thank you to Ryan and Marcy for their really insightful presentations. We really, really appreciate all that you shared to support the success stories in PA SnapEd.